Hello everyone. We're very pleased to announce that RAD Studio 12.3 Athens is now available. Your presenters today are Nuno Castro, Marco Cantu, and David Millington from the PM team, and myself, Ian Barker, the developer advocate. Before we carry on, for the people that don't know, we'll just do a recap of what is RAD Studio in case this is your first time seeing this kind of presentation. RAD Studio is an advanced IDE for visually building high-performance platform-native apps for Windows, Linux, iOS, macOS, and Android from a single codebase in Delphi, and for Windows in C++. What's great about RAD Studio? Well, all these things: developer productivity. Shipping is a feature. If you don't ship code, you're just a very expensive research organization. Get to market 5 times faster using RAD Studio and an IDE. Fast native apps. Native compilers give your apps the speed they need. Platform API access, one of the things we're very good at. We give you access to all the platform APIs on all of the platforms. So you're getting the pure power of the operating system that's sitting underneath, whether it's Windows, Android, or iOS. You're not wrapped inside some kind of protected container. It is a native application. Also, the one thing we're very, very good at as well is database access. And that's been true from the very first release of Delphi 30 years ago. It's the key to Delphi's initial design. Database access using RAD Studio is very, very easy and extremely fast. And also, the other strength is the fact that we have visual designers. You don't need to prototype in some other tool, some other graphic design tool like Canva or something like that. You can just design it in the IDE and finish it in the IDE. So what you design, what you agree with your customers or your team is what will come out as the eventual product. Strong community. We've got a very good selection of technology partners providing things like component libraries, APIs, and all sorts of add-ons. A very good team of MVPs spread around the world, our most valuable professionals who are there to show the benefits of the product, explain various features. There are also trainers and authors around the world. Delphi-books.com has got a whole selection of books that will teach you everything you could ever want about RAD Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder. And of course, our developers worldwide. Backward compatibility is also something we're very, very proud of. You can take a program written in a very early version of Delphi and almost certainly open it in RAD Studio with Delphi, or even C++ Builder, open older programs of that, and they will still work today. Your investment in your code, it still keeps it relevant. This is almost a unique feature around the world of software development. That very strong backward compatibility is something that we try and strive to make sure that your investment in code is a good investment. It's there for future generations. Highlights of RAD Studio 12.x so far. Well, we started off with 12.0 Athens, and it was a mega release. We had Visual Assist was incorporated for the first time for C++. We also launched our first preview of Clang, or C-Lang compiler, which is the standard compiler used by many, many projects around the world. It added a whole level or layer of compatibility that was previously impossible. Very proud of that. We also looked at the installer and the IDE to do things like multi-device icons. You can now create an icon with a graphic, and with a couple of clicks it creates all of those extra little images and icons that are needed by things like iOS and Android. So many graphics. I used to waste so much time having to match up to the requirements of Apple, and now it's very easy. Drop an image on and click, 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 out it comes, done, all the work done for you, and it looks great as well, including the splash screens. We also improved the VCL designers and the Tools API to give you much more power within the IDE, and also allowed our third-party technical partners and our add-on suppliers and extension writers the ability to do a lot of things inside the IDE for you and do things that were previously impossible. Another big thing we did was incorporate Skier within the IDE. You don't need to add it, it's built in. With a couple of clicks, to enable Skier. You add all the power of the Skier project to your programs with virtually nothing else to worry about. It also brings along some wonderful UI controls that allow you to do things like rendering graphics and animations much more powerfully than you could have done previously. And it also works with VCL, not just FireMonkey. It improves the quality of rendering and just does so many things. Just watch one of our videos to see what it can do. It will blow your mind, especially things like shaders. They're fantastic. We also didn't ignore our older and more tried and tested UI components that are used in nearly every project, and that is T-Memo and T-Edit improvements that we made. Those components are used everywhere, and so it's quite important for us to pay some attention to those and tweak some things and add some benefits to those controls so that your projects, however straightforward they are or however complex they are, you get those benefits as well. We also did some work on the VCL to address things like MDI. Microsoft deprecated the MDI format, and also because of that, they had a few issues. We went ahead and redesigned how MDI worked internally, reworked on that, and did a lot of extra effort to make sure that your MDI metaphor, your MDI user interface, which is still very, very popular with people, would carry on working and be much more efficient than it was before, way into the future, even if Microsoft dropped it. We know that some of you really loved it and depended on it. We also addressed things like tab-based UIs and fonts and screen improvements and component improvements as well. We also looked at data. So we added JSON data binding. JSON is just absolutely everywhere now, and so we made sure that we had addressed the ability for you to data bind to JSON. We also improved and added elements to the FireDAC component library for secure coding, including, when you think about secure coding, squids. It's a funny name, but if you know what they are, they're very, very important for security, and we added those into RAD Server. With Delphi, we also addressed a few things like adding the ability to have multi-line string literals, which is something people ask for. And it allows you to do things like have a SQL statement, which is often multi-line. It could be expressed more intuitively inside your code, and you could see straight away, oh, it's a SQL statement, rather than trying to have it all fit on one line or lots of plus signs in the middle. No, you don't need to do that. A multi-line string literal does that all for you. We also address things that are kind of quality of life improvements, like improving circular user statements, which could have caused you a problem a few versions ago, but with RAD Studio 12 Athens, we addressed that. And another theme for RAD Studio 12 was quality. We addressed many publicly reported and privately discovered issues and bug fixes and quality elements throughout the product. It's one of the things we set out to aim to do with version 12. It's one of our main themes, and we addressed lots and lots of bug fixes just in 12.0. And we didn't stop there, because in 12.1 we doubled down again on quality. We added some substantial features, one of which was editor split view. So now you can split your code, so you can open a new editor window and have that split and show the visual designer and the code that's behind it at the same time. You can undock those and have them on multiple monitors if you want, including splits, left, right, up, down, however you want. It was a big deal. We also delivered new C++ Win64 Clang or CLang compiler, a very, very big step forward, really exciting development for C++ Builder. We thought it was great. And it does so much more things that David Millington will explain in a moment. And also Android API level 34 support before it was needed as well. We try to keep ahead of the curve. Quality highlights included C++ Builder Visual Assist integration, a very cool thing, and VCL and extensive FireMonkey quality, and the runtime library and database. Everywhere we could, we touched on quality. And while we were at it, we released 12.2, which included a number of other features as well. We modernized the C++ compiler and tool chains once more. We also took all of the Delphi compilers and made all of those executables 64-bit. Even the 32-bit compiler is a 64-bit app. And the same with all the tools as well. This was so that you've got more power and more memory behind there, because the 64-bit address space, of course, is much wider. We also added a thing called Smart Code Insight, which was our first step at integrating AI into the IDE. And we did it in a way to make sure that you're in control. It's off by default. There's no AI built in to sneak around and give away your secrets to competitors. It's all under your control. This was something we thought was very, very important. We also added focus mode, some people call that Zen mode, and also another quality of life thing was scroll bar annotation, so that you could see where your errors were at a glance, like a document map. But my favorite feature out of all of these for 12.2 was web stencils. A very easy way to create client-side web apps and server-side serving up of data very, very easily. You create regular HTML pages. You can give it to a web designer who doesn't know anything about Delphi, and all they need to do is design that web page and put in some keywords, some stencil commands, I suppose you would call them, and off you go. You've got a very powerful web-enabled content. And that will even do things like HTMX, which is the big flavor of the month in terms of dynamic web development. So web stencils are very, very cool. And finally, once more, we carried on doubling down on quality, including improving mobile development, the Visual Assist for C++ Builder enhancements, and quality. So, what are the themes for RAD Studio 12.3? Well, our themes are 12.x projects completion, so finishing off those features that we introduced in 12.0, 12.1 and 12.2. We are also adding Android API at level 35, very, very important. You will need it if you are trying to target the Android Play Store. It's compulsory from August 2025 to have support for API level 35. If you get RAD Studio 12.3, you will be able to support it today inside your apps. Also, big new feature, a 64-bit IDE, our initial release. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we're very, very excited about this. It's something that people have been waiting for a long time. And of course, to carry on with the 12.x theme, quality. Anyway, I'm going to hand over now to David.
Thanks, Ian. RAD Studio 12.3 is mostly a quality release where we round the 12.x series out. C++ is no exception to this. In 12.2, we finished the Clang upgrade and delivered an amazing new C++ toolchain, the modern compiler for Win64. It is a recent version of Clang with a new STL, new tech underpinnings, CMake support, inbuilt parallel compilation, and far more. It's the best C++ toolchain we've shipped in 2 decades. This release, having shipped that, we focused on polish and refining before we moved forward in future. We did a lot of quality work. If you had any issues, we recommend trying out 12.3. We've been working with customers on real-world code bases to ensure they work smoothly. As well as quality work on the compiler and the linker side, we also improved the debugger performance. The debugger has what are called formatters, which are what take complex data types like a std map or deck and present them in an understandable way. They're what let you evaluate a map element while debugging, for example. Now that's key, but the formatters were written in Python. So this release, we rewrote most of them in C++ and got a great performance boost. You should find evaluating complex STL types much faster. When we released the new toolchain last release in 12.2, we made a big deal out of the compiler performance. We had multiple charts showing how fast it was. We have it using parallel compilation by default, using all your CPU cores and compiling as fast as your machine will let it. We discussed how, if you have a good modern machine, you may be able to compile faster than with Classic. Well, in 12.3 we did it again. The modern compiler is now up to 15% faster just by default. Install 12.3, it'll be faster. But you can get even more speed out of it. Make sure your source code is formatted as UTF-8 with a byte order mark. And from our internal measurements, you may see another 5 to 6% performance gained. And yes, we ship our source files, the modern compiler's STL, formatted like this. So any compilation you do that includes the STL will automatically benefit. Add those together, and you could be looking at 20% faster just by using 12.3. And remember, this is with the already incredible performance that you get by using the new compiler in the first place, and it's 20% faster than that. That is not bad for a point release. One other thing we added is to help people move from the classic BCC32 to the new modern Win64. So, first off, we strongly recommend using the new toolchain. I really want to get that message across. Use the new toolchain. But, of course, old code has quirks, and sometimes you can't just add a new toolchain and recompile. I had a blog series over December with a lot of solutions, easy fixes, resources on making use of the diagnostics and help the new toolchain provides. And in 12.3, we have some additions to our RTL, our runtime library, that add compatibility with some things the old classic compiler had, and even a small header called bccompat.h that defines a few symbols and macros that your old code may need. Now, this is definitely not everything classic had, it's just the most common, and this isn't a major feature, it's just a few key things that's small. But the goal here is to help you get your code compiling. Don't ship code using this, but use it to migrate your code. But we hope to remove any obstacles you find and make it easy to move forward. But don't forget, we really are strongly messaging move to the new toolchain, and this should make any issues you have just that little bit easier. So, lots of quality work, including performance, and helping you to move forward. But while we have emphasized moving to the new toolchain, we also emphasize strongly why we have the new toolchain, that it is a foundation for the future. The new toolchain lets us build things we could not before. The new toolchain lets us deliver really valuable and useful things to you, things that make your code and your apps better, where better is safer, more stable, more robust, more performant, higher quality for you and your customers. So, even in a quality release, what kind of things has having this foundation let us deliver? Well, it turns out we added a couple of great new features too. Let's start with CPUs. CPUs have what are called instruction sets, which are the various assembly instructions they understand. And every few years, new capabilities get added to new CPUs, meaning new sets of instructions to use them. And those new capabilities and instructions mostly translate to performance and efficiency. So you want your app to use them if you can. But our Win64 toolchains only supported the SSE2 level, which is the baseline for Win64 code, until now. In 12.3, we are introducing support for using 6, count them, 6 more instruction sets. That's SSE3, SSSE3, SSE 4.1 and 4.2, AVX, and AVX2. You can pick which one you want, depending on the hardware your customers have. Whatever you choose, the modern toolchain has a great code optimizer, and now it can use new and modern CPU instruction sets to make your apps significantly faster. These 6 new instruction sets span about 13 years of CPU development, or longer, if you count the time it took from when one was first introduced to when it would be standard in any new off-the-shelf CPU. So this means that in 12.3, we have moved the C++ Builder product forward by about 13 years minimum, which is a pretty big leap in just one point release. We hope that you find the compiled app performance this can enable for you worthwhile, and that it really improves the software that you give to your customers. But that's not all. We've also added a new section to the C++ project options called Safety. And in this are 2 new features we've been asked to add for years. Now they're here. And these are 2 features called sanitizers. These are runtime checking. You turn them on, rebuild your app, and then when it runs, it finds bugs and issues. They're a bit like CodeGuard in the old classic compiler. They are the address sanitizer, which tracks memory issues. It checks all memory access, finds out of bounds or double freeze, that sort of thing. For a few reasons and quirks, we recommend after turning this on, you run the app from the command line to handle all the errors it finds correctly. Then there's the undefined behavior sanitizer. This one finds areas where your code is doing something, but it might not be doing what you intended it to be doing. Both these analyze C++ code. They won't analyze anything Delphi does, though of course they are fine if you have Delphi source in your app. They instrument and analyze your C++. These are really useful for code quality and code safety. And when you fix what these find, your apps will be far more robust, stable, and safe. So that's the polish and refinement and quality work for C++ Modern in 12.3. Lots of quality. I've spoken about features here, but by time, the vast majority of our effort went into really revising and ensuring everything was perfect, a full focus on quality. We have debugger evaluation performance. We have compiler performance again, and some assistance, moving from classic to our recommended toolchain, the modern toolchain. We have 6 new instruction sets for modern CPUs and 2 runtime safety checkers. We hope all C++ and RAD Studio customers download 12.3, and once again we emphasize, make sure you use the modern toolchain and have fun. And now over to Marco.
Thanks, David. The next feature we have recently introduced and we have expanded in 12.3 is our AI LLMs integration called Smart Code Insight. In fact, to help our customers leverage the LLMs for coding, RAD Studio 12.2 introduced an open architecture for AI plugins, offering ready-to-use support for 3 online solutions, which are OpenAI, Gemini by Google, and Claude by Anthropic, and also one offline solution you can install locally, which is Ollama with CodeLlama. These architectures offers multiple goals. Everything is optional and disabled by default. We make available multiple providers and let you choose which one or which ones you want to enable in the IDE. And again, because we include a locally installed offline solution, offers the maximum privacy you can obtain while still using an LLM to help you coding. RAD Studio 12.3 further improves Smart Code Insight, adding a few notable extensions to the user interface, focused on improving the chat experience and have a better and more integrated experience when using the editor commands alongside with the chat window. The chat window now supports Markdown, so it offers properly formatted and more readable output in general. The other change is that it allows reading editor content, and this can be done in 2 ways. You can click on one of the buttons that are available to copy some of the editor content into the actual prompt, or you can use special macros in text to extract the same information in a more programmatic way. But there is another change. The commands issued in the editor offer the option to send the result to the Markdown enabled chat window. So rather than sending it to the editor itself, which remains an option, you can send the result to a better formatted response. Now there's a bit more. We now have a flexible option in the configuration dialog. We can provide a list of models automatically, and this is not a statically crafted list, but it's a list that can be refreshed directly from the specific engine, asking which are the models you currently support. That is important because that list is continuously updated by the vendor, and you can easily update the model you're using in your coding experience in RAD Studio. Finally, there is one new feature among the editor commands, which is find unit. And the idea is you select a type or a symbol, and you can find the required use statement to include in the code. Let's have a quick demo of these features. The first thing I want to show you regarding Smart Code Insight is that you don't have to type in the name of the model anymore, but you can use this combo to load the available models and pick one of the models returned by the actual API of the provider you have selected. The second thing I want to show is the fact that now when you are asking a question, what is Delphi, you get an answer that is now formatted with MD, which is much nicer. The interesting thing is that not only the chat has this better UI, but also if you have code selected in the editor, you can ask something about the code. Explain me what this code does. And then you can use a macro to pick the selection. And similarly, you get a result nicely formatted in the chat window. Similarly, and that is better demonstrated by dropping the chat window on the side, is you can use commands in the editor itself. Rather than sending the result to the editor, you can now send the result to the chat window. So for example, if we are looking for bugs in this code and there is one glaring one, then you can ask for information directly from the editor and have the result displayed in the chat window. A different thing that you might want to do, and in this case you might want to keep the result in the editor, is find unit. Suppose that you want to use an ini file and you don't remember which is the unit, and of course you get an error message saying undeclared identifier. And now what we can do here is do find unit, and most likely we'll get information of which is the unit that we need to add above to our uses statement. And then we go back to our code. There are other features introduced in RAD Studio 12.2 we are expanding in the 12.3 release. One of them is the availability also in the professional edition of the 64-bit binary version of the Delphi compilers for Win32 and Win64. This offers the ability to build extremely large application as a single executable and do it from the 32-bit IDE using an external build. Of course, they can also directly be invoked from the new 64-bit IDE. These compilers were introduced in 12.2, but they were limited to Enterprise and Architect. Now they are available in all paid editions. Not only that, but we've worked on the performance of these compilers and improved their quality. One of our customers' favorite feature in 12.2 was Web Stencils. It's a server-side script-based integration, a way to process HTML files on a server. This allows you to build modern websites based on any JavaScript library and powered by data that you extract and you process using RAD Studio. In particular, Web Stencils can be a very good foundation of HTMX, and we have published extensive documentation about this feature over the last few months, and we encourage you to have a look. In RAD Studio 12.3, Web Stencils has been extended with access to nested objects, so object.subobject.property, and also subtables in nested datasets. And also we've expanded the way the @ symbol is processed when used outside of the scope of the actual Web Stencil token. Makes your code more compatible with existing general purpose HTML. And the last thing, we've improved the handling of UTF-8 characters a little bit. And now to Nuno.
Hello everyone, Nuno Castro here from the PM team. Starting August 2025, the minimum Android API level to publish apps on the Play Store will be level 35. If you plan to do so, RAD Studio 12.3 will be the version for you, if we have updated the default value for the target SDK version to 35. This was a lot of work behind the scenes by our development team, but we took the chance to do many related improvements and changes. For example, we updated the NDK and SDK versions. We added support for 16 kilobyte page sizes for faster system and apps performance. We add a new compiler option, allow row segments, that removes some of the strict rules of the compiler to allow compatibility with older versions of Android prior to API 29. and we added new provisioning options and user permissions. This means that Delphi supports state-of-the-art Android development. This is an area that we are excited with, that we like to do work on, and we can't wait to see what kind of apps you will build with Delphi for mobile in the future. Now, over to David.
Thanks, Nunu. We have something very exciting to share this release for all our customers. And that is a version of the RAD Studio IDE, including Delphi and C++ Builder, that is 64-bit, a 64-bit IDE. This is a massive product milestone and something really exciting to deliver. It's valuable to you because it lets you use the 64-bit build of the Delphi compiler with its ultra-large memory space inside the IDE itself. It also lets you use 64-bit database drivers at design time. Plus, of course, it's a 64-bit world, and moving to 64-bit is something we all need to do. Before continuing, I want to note, I look after the IDE, so I'm doing the voiceover for this section, but it has been a major effort across multiple teams. And we really need to thank and give credit to Marco and Nunu, who are both online, as well as many other staff. Now, the 32-bit version of the IDE remains the default in 12.3. That is, if you just start the normal version of Delphi or C++ Builder or RAD Studio, that normal version is 32-bit, the same as it always was in 12.2 and earlier. But you can also install the new 64-bit version, and it's installed side by side in parallel with the 32-bit one. You get two sets of shortcuts in the Start menu. You can then run either of them, or both of them at once. In fact, you can see in my taskbar in the screenshot here, I have the normal 32-bit IDE and the 64-bit IDE both running, and I'll show both at once in a demo in a minute. Before we get into it, it is important to note that we're naming this the initial release. It's gigantic work, and we've planned the scope of what is delivered in 12.3 carefully. The new 64-bit IDE does not yet match the 32-bit IDE in functionality. It's got all the essentials, but 12.3 it is not the same, and it's a version 1. Use it knowing it's a version 1. But that said, let's look at what's included. So, I mentioned that we planned the scope of the first version of the 64-bit IDE carefully. The IDE is a huge piece of software, so we are phasing it in piece by piece. And in 12.3, the initial release of the Windows 64-bit IDE is meant for building Windows 64-bit apps. And for Win64, it has all the things you need. It supports VCL and FireMonkey, form design, editing, debugging, FireDAC and DBExpress and DataSnap, and so forth. So you can design, compile, and debug an app for Win64 that includes packages and DLLs, i.e. the fundamentals for building Win64 apps are all here. Things that are not included, and this is just in the initial release, include type library support and ActiveX projects, Delphi refactorings and audits and metrics, Control-J for live templates, Visual Assist, and of course targeting any non-Win64 platform. So you can see we're shipping the fundamentals, the core features, but in the initial release, not everything is there yet. You might wonder, what does it mean by targeting only Win64? What if you have a project that has other platforms in it, like macOS or even Windows 32? Well, it's fine. When you open a project in the 64-bit IDE, those platforms are hidden, but when you open the same project back in the 32-bit IDE later, they'll be visible again. I think this is easier to explain with a diagram and screenshots. So, you or I might start off with a project that has lots of platforms, and in the 32-bit IDE, they're all visible. You can see a screenshot of the target platforms in the projects view here, and there are a lot of target platforms. You can compile for each one of those platforms when you open the project in the 32-bit IDE. When I open the same project in the initial release of the 64-bit IDE, most of those platforms are hidden. Now they're still there, they're just hidden. You won't see them in the projects view, and you can't compile and debug for them as targets from the 64-bit IDE. In this initial release, you can only compile and debug for the Windows 64-bit target. Also, my example project here had lots of platforms, but it didn't have the Windows 64-bit target. So when I've opened it in the 64-bit IDE, that target platform is automatically added. But don't worry, seeing all the other platforms not present is completely okay. When you close the project and open it back in the 32-bit IDE, you can see they're all there again, visible and usable. It is meant to be completely safe to open your project in the 64-bit IDE, make changes, save it, and open it in the 32-bit IDE. Not only will you have your changes, but the other platforms will still be there and reappear. Something new in the 64-bit IDE is the debugger. When using the 64-bit IDE only, the Delphi Win64 debugger is different to the debugger used for Delphi Win64 in the 32-bit IDE. This is a new development and an entirely new technology, and like the rest of the 64-bit IDE, you can consider it a version 1. It isn't a full match in features yet, but again, all the fundamentals are there. So, brand new 64-bit IDE, the initial release targeting Win64 development. Let's have a look at it. Here you can see I'm running two IDEs side by side. On the left is the 32-bit IDE, and I'll make that light or grey. And on the right is the 64-bit IDE, and I'll make that dark because dark mode is cool and the 64-bit IDE is cool, but also, as well as annotating on screen, this is to make it more obvious in the demo here which one is which. Settings are shared, by the way, including color scheme, so both will start out with the same theme. That's why I'm changing it live. I have a VCL skier demo open in both. You can see the VCL form designer is there, MyMonkeyWorks 2, and all the components you expect are present. Note that on the left, in the 32-bit IDE, I have two target platforms. But when I open the same project on the right, in the 64-bit IDE, only the Win64 target platform is visible and the other is hidden. In code, I have a breakpoint, and in the 32-bit IDE, I can run and debug as you'd expect. I can evaluate an expression, such as a form.name, add a watch, and in the local variables, expand to see fields. Let's do the same in the 64-bit IDE. I have a breakpoint in the same location. I can evaluate, add a watch, and drill down into objects. You'll note that this debugger doesn't give as much information as the 32-bit one, mostly being that it evaluates objects as their address, and so you need to use the local variables or inspect view to drill down into them. And that's an example of how this debugger is the initial release as well. But equally, you can see that our entirely new debugger has all the basics, all the fundamentals present. If I open up Task Manager, you can see that I have two BDS.exe processors, and one of them is indeed 64-bit. Plus, note that in the About box, and in the title bar, and also in the product icon and splash screen and taskbar for that matter, we do have a small 64-bit label. Some technical details. All packages loaded into the 64-bit IDE, both design time component packages and plugins, need to be 64-bit. Most component vendors already support 64-bit at runtime, so we hope enabling it for design time won't be too hard. If you have your own custom components, you will need to install a 64-bit version of the package in the 64-bit IDE. In general, everything is the same. There are no unexpected changes. Settings are mostly shared, so what you configure in the options applies to both 32-bit and 64-bit. There are only a few exceptions, which are to do with installed components, plugins, and the debugger. In general, things like the recently opened projects list, or the color scheme, or any other configuration will be shared. So that's the 64-bit IDE. This is the initial release, and we do obviously plan further work over time with our normal GA caveat. It's very exciting to deliver this in 12.3. The 64-bit IDE is available for all product editions, including Pro. You can access 64-bit database drivers, and compiling uses the 64-bit build of the Delphi compiler inside the IDE. This means both the IDE and compiling has access to very large amounts of memory if you need it. You can use both 32 and 64-bit versions of the IDE at the same time. Remember, it's an optional install, so check that you install it if you want it. We're very excited about this, and it really indicates a forward-looking modern direction. The world is 64-bit, and so are we. We know many of you have asked for this, and we hope it's really valuable to you. And we hope you enjoy using it. And now, over to Nunu.
Hello, Nunu again here. Now for quality and the IDE, and starting by Delphi LSP. First, I'd like to say that the 64-bit engine is now available to Pro customers on the 32-bit IDE. Plus, we have addressed some compiler-related issues that were causing memory leaks and then crashing LSP server, and that was taken care of. Plus, we have fixed a few issues with code completion and code navigation. Now, for VA for C++ Builder, we have cleaned up our integration, and we no longer show errors when opening some projects or project groups. Plus, we have fixed an issue where code completion was not being triggered for some libraries. For the IDE in general, we have done some tweaks to the Tools API, where, for example, where opening recent projects, the wait dialog would appear empty, it doesn't anymore. And we added a new feature where the caret can be colorized for better visibility and accessibility. Plus, we have fixed more than 120 issues, what was a major effort for our dev team. To finish with, I would like to say that Delphi LSP quality is not yet where we wanted it to be, especially for customers with large code bases, but on the next release, we will tackle this problem from a different angle, and we will try a new architecture to solve some of the issues that our customers with large code bases are facing, and we hope that it will bring better stability and quality overall. With that being said, now over to Marco.
Thanks, Nuno. While RAD Studio 12.3 has dozens of improvements to the core RTL library and other libraries, there are two areas we have looked into in particular. We looked into a few long-standing issues in the WSDL importer tool and the SOAP invocation in general. Also, we improved the quality of our Bluetooth and Bluetooth LE support across all the target platforms. The change includes a new event on MTU changed, which is called when the BLE transmission configuration changes and you need to adapt your code to it. It's also worth calling out the VCL quality work we have done around VCL styles, high DPI, and other general improvements to VCL controls. In particular, we've made some enhancements to the image collection design time editor. For FireMonkey, this release adds a new command line tool to generate FireMonkey styles starting from VCL styles. Rather than having to open the style in the designer and then saving it in a different format, you can invoke the same tool on the command line. Also, we upgraded the Skia for Delphi version that we integrate. We did additional improvements in tmemo, which has been subject of a lot of change over the last few releases to improve its quality and the features overall. Also, we made change to the dynamic style loading on all platforms other than Windows and on the Z Order Manager, specifically on Windows. With 12.3, we continue to deliver significant improvements to both FireMonkey and VCL, addressing customer reports and also reworking the internal implementation of some core and commonly used components for better performance and better stability overall. RAD Server also sees some small but significant improvements related with the formatting of dates and time values in JSON responses. We have unified the way they are managed, so there are no discrepancies anymore. We have introduced an option to obfuscate the values for the master key and the app secret in the INI configuration files, so that we use MD5 to not make them directly readable. We have also introduced the concept of instance-wide custom variable. It's a configuration variable you can put in an external file, which allows you to parameterize the scripts processed by RAD Server without having to hard code these values in the application. And finally, there's a new endpoint hide attribute. Well, the name implies what it does. It hides an endpoint, not making it available to the outside. In terms of FireDuck and database access in general, the 12.2 release adds support for migrating from IBX to FireDuck with the refined utility, which is also available for a number of other different migrations from BDE, ADO, and so forth. Of course, we're also adding specific support for the 64-bit IDE with 64-bit driver access, which is one of the key reasons to move to the new IDE. If you need to talk with database at design time, which only provides a 64-bit driver. In terms of specific databases, we now officially support MicroSQL Server 2022. We have updated the driver for MongoDB to version 8, which also allows you to connect to MongoDB Atlas. Added support for MySQL 8.4 and one specific feature of Oracle, which is database resident connection pooling. While RAD Studio 12.3 delivers the initial release of the 64-bit version of the RAD Studio IDE and a long list of smaller features we've covered in this webinar, there has been very significant focus on quality. We provided a specific fix for 350 customer reports and implemented a few feature requests, counting all type of resolutions, including duplicates, issues that no longer apply, or we consider test case errors, or decided not to fix. We have addressed over 500 customer reports, which we're going to mark as resolved in the next few days. And that's, again, affecting both the old and the new portal, and we'll mark them closed in the old and the new portal.
In addition to the quality portal, we also wanted to mention about a focus on content, and that is our recent ebooks. If you look in the Get It Package Manager down the left, you'll see a category that says Books. If you select that, you'll see two books that we have out already. One is about HTMX and web stencils, basically how to do some very powerful and modern web development using RAD Studio and the built-in web stencils feature. And the other book is called Getting Started with RAD Studio. This is for new developers who are beginning to use RAD Studio for the first time. It may be they know how to code, and this helps them convert from a different type of programming language, or it may be that they're new developers altogether and they just want to know how to use the IDE. They may want to supplement that with other handbooks that we have available.
This is what we wanted to cover in this webinar in terms of the RAD Studio 12.3 release, which offers 12x project completion and extensions, Android API level 35, which is fundamental for the Play Store this summer, 64-bit IDE initial release, which is a great milestone for Embarcadero, and quality and enhancements in all product areas. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy using RAD Studio 12.3.